Good morning and welcome to the College of Business Administration panel discussion on mediation. We're very honored and delighted to have Zena Zumeta presenting today to share her over 30 years of experience in mediation. Joining Zena on the panel will be attorney and mediator Ellen Axt-Jones and MIU's own Vicki Alexander Harriet. We're so excited to be here with these amazing women who are powerhouses in the field of mediation. Zena will be presenting to us on mediation this morning, and Ellen and Vicki will dialogue with her to go deeper into the subject. Then we will open the floor for questions. So a little bit more about the amazing Zena. Internationally known as both a mediator and trainer of mediators, Zena D. Zumeta is president of the Mediation Training and Consultation Institute, Zena Zumeta Mediation Services, and the Collaborative Workplace in Ann Arbor, Michigan. She received her Juris Doctor from the University of Michigan's Law School. Ms. Zumeta is a former board member and president of the Academy of Family Mediators, past president of the Michigan Council for Family and Divorce Mediation, and past regional vice president of the Society of Professionals in Dispute Resolution. She is a member of the Editorial Board of the American Bar Association's Dispute Resolution magazine. Ms. Zumeta has extensive experience as a trainer, mediator, facilitator, and consultant. She has been providing mediation services since 1981. She is an approved civil and family mediator in Michigan and an approved mediation trainer for Michigan and many other states. She has taught at Hamline University School of Law and is an adjunct professor at Pepperdine University School of Law's Strauss Institute for Dispute Resolution, and Cooley Law School. Ms. Zumeta is the recipient of the Family Mediation Council Michigan Lifetime Achievement in Mediation Award, the National Education Association Saturn Corporation Award for Union Management Collaboration, the John Haynes Distinguished Mediator Award from the Association for Conflict Resolution, and the Kumba Award from the National Conference on Minorities in ADR. Zena has been practicing transcendental meditation for almost 50 years and has practiced the TM Cities technique for almost 40. So those are some pretty incredible credentials. I'm going to hand the floor over now to Zena, who will speak to us about mediation. Welcome, Zena.
It wasn't letting me unmute. I'm so sorry. So I'm so glad to be here. And particularly glad to be doing this for MIU because MIU is very, very close to my heart. I also am delighted to be talking to people who are in business, thinking about going into business, because business is all about conflict in so many different areas. And of course, mediation is about conflict resolution. So one of the things that Jenny mentioned is that I had been doing for a very long time union management collaborative negotiations and was a union side labor negotiator for many years. And that's all about resolving conflict and seeing conflict and sometimes making conflict, I have to admit. And then that was really what led me to thinking about mediation in terms of, excuse me, it's all allergies. Thinking about, okay, if we have conflict, how does conflict get resolved? And what is it that we need to be doing to get it resolved? So I thought, okay, instead of just being on one side, maybe I'm going to try being in the middle and see what happens. So let me talk a little bit about what mediation is, and then talk a little bit about my connection from mediation to meditation, which is has always been of interest to me because a lot of people who walk into a mediation office think it's meditation. So I just say, oh, okay, well, the meditation office is down there, so I can send them there. So let me share my screen. So mediation, there are a couple of different definitions of mediation, and one of the things that I like about it is that it is a very broad field. I think a lot of people think of it only in connection to litigation, and certainly that's it is ordered in litigation. There are a lot of times that it is connected, but it's also a very informal process as well. So the two definitions, one of them is talking about identifying issues, communication, but really focusing on settlement, mutually acceptable settlement. The other one really, the other definition really is looking at how people can improve their understanding of one another and then develop solutions that are acceptable to them. And I added, if they want to, because there are people who really are not there to settle things, really more for understanding. And I think that's often true in business, that it's the understanding that people need to reach, maybe not so much the agreements. And as someone who may be in management, one of the things that I think is really important is for managers to distinguish when people are looking for a resolution and when what people need is understanding, when they're looking for a resolution from management, and when management needs to know how to help individuals, employees, figure out how to work it out themselves and assist them in that process. And that's really where the skills of a mediator come in, I think, most with management, is how do you help other people settle instead of telling people what to do. So where mediation lies in litigation is between negotiation, which is the two parties talking to each other, and then third parties get involved, mediation helping them negotiate, moving into evaluating a case, arbitrating, which is making a final and binding decision, or trial, which is the judge intervening. Also, we like to take a look at what's important in terms of the privacy versus the public. Mediation and negotiation are private. All the others can be very public. Informal versus formal, and mediation again falls on the informal side, and whether the parties have more control or less control over the outcome. So the most control is if they're sitting and talking, least control is when an arbitrator or a judge makes a decision, and mediation, the parties are still in control. So one of the definitions that I like is the one down at the bottom on the left here, excuse me, that mediation is really negotiations with a mediator brought in. So what mediators are doing is helping parties negotiate, helping them do the work. So the principles that we use are self-determination, that the parties are in control. It's their solution, not ours, but that there needs to be informed consent. That if they agree to something and they don't understand it, that's not okay. That we need to help them understand what it is that they agreed to, what the issues are, and also what the implications are of that agreement. And then that we are neutral, that we aren't helping either party, we aren't on the side of either party, also that we are not attached to any particular outcome. So when we look at negotiation, really that's on the side of free will. People sit down, they talk, they identify their own issues, talk about the solutions, come up with, hopefully, with something that's acceptable. Mediation can be compulsory. That is, it can be ordered by the court. And then as a neutral intervener, people have to choose us or the court can order us, but hopefully we are acceptable to both parties or all parties, and then we're helping them in their negotiation. The goals of mediation can be very different depending upon what the context of the mediation is. Could be settlement of a litigation, could be just solving a problem, could be understanding two people, just where they're coming from, could be trying to reach an agreement on something, or empowerment and recognition, which is the transformative mediation. I'll talk a little bit more about that. So who are the participants? Mediator and the parties, obviously, but then we can add attorneys. Why is this not, there we go. Interpreters, witnesses, support people, observers, any of those people could be a part of a mediation. And when you think about support people, you think about the vulnerability of people who are part of a mediation and what do they need to feel comfortable and to be successful in the process. So facilitative evaluative, this is a big deal to a lot of us in the field. That is, are we providing people with our own opinions, which is on the evaluative directive side? Are we staying way away from that and just helping to elicit what the parties are thinking, facilitate what they're doing? Where do we fall on that? And I think it's really important for the parties and the attorneys to know how any individual mediator practices. What do they do? And then in terms of transformative mediation, that's a very different approach. So there they look at conflict as relational. That's part of the relationship between people. And what they're focusing on is empowering parties, recognizing themselves and others, trying to support each other and understand each other. So what the mediator does is mostly reflect the party's words. Which is why they call it observational. And then respecting the party's choices, they stay in control. One of the things that we talk about is that in terms of facilitative mediation, that the mediator owns the process, the parties own the outcome. In terms of evaluative mediation, that the mediator owns the process, but has a big say in the outcome. And then in transformative mediation, that it's really the parties who own both the process and the outcome. So what are some tasks and traits? We chair the meeting, we communicate with people, we may educate, definitely provide resources. Agent of reality, if somebody's way out on a limb, we want to let them know they're way out on a limb. And we want to make sure that any agreement that people reach actually will work. And so we may ask a lot of what if questions when they come to their resolution. And we can be a scapegoat. Our traits that we are definitely neutral, trying to be patient, persevering, that we want to be the ones who let go of the process last. Flexible, so that if the parties turn right, we're turning right with them. Hopefully honest about what's going on, not lying about what the other side thinks. Empathic really helps, because then the parties feel like we care about whether they reach a resolution and what that is. And hopefully we are respected as well. So the best mediators, I think, are patient, effective listeners, persistent, and optimistic. In terms of the structure, there is a typical structure to mediation. Pre-mediation interviews have been shown by research to make a huge difference in the ability of parties to settle. But once we get into the mediation, we do an introduction opening statement, they do an introduction opening statement. Then we start to summarize, set an agenda, begin to explore what the issues are, sometimes with the parties in the same room, sometimes with them in different rooms. Then we're looking for options for settlement. With the options, we then want them to negotiate around the options and come to some conclusion, usually mixing and matching different things, which is what we call the package deals. So we're looking at parties who come in with a position and trying to figure out what are the underlying needs and interests. We do that by active listening, articulating, helping them to articulate what are their issues and interests, and setting that agenda, and then moving the interests into options for resolution, and capturing any options on the fly. I often think of it as boom, grabbing it as it flies by, and then moving options into resolution, hopefully getting an agreement and drafting that agreement. I also want to just mention, excuse me, the differences between early stage and late stage mediation, because they really look different. A lot of times mediation is used right before trial, right before a hearing. Everybody has been working on this case for however long. They're disgusted with each other, very defensive. And so it becomes like an impasse resolution process. Some people feel that it's very evaluative and coercive. Whereas if we can get people into mediation early on, excuse me, then it becomes more of a facilitated process, more of a conference where people are sitting around a table trying to work things out, building understanding, agreement, and the empowerment. So an early stage more likely to be together in joint sessions, looking at needs and interests and options, discussions leading to understanding and anticipating problems for the future, whereas late stage is much more separate rooms, creating doubt in people's positions as opposed to creating understanding, using both the lawyers and the mediators to try to create some leverage for people to settle. The mediator may be predicting outcomes, but very, very focused on settlement. So I have some questions that you might be interested in looking at later. That what is neutrality? What does it mean to facilitate as opposed to evaluate? How do we help people create their own solutions to their problems? And then what's the difference between a resolution and a mutually, quote unquote, mutually acceptable solution? So I also want to mention the mistake of the intellect, which was one of the things that I came upon when I was on a WPA here at MIU. And there was a lecture that was going to be given. It was in the WPA agenda. And I looked at the title and I thought, whoa, I have to go there. And I don't know why I thought I had to go there, but it just really spoke to me, just even the title. And when I got there to the lecture, the things that stood out to me about it were that people, individuals, and the intellect are really drawn to smaller and smaller pieces of the whole, to the point that the intellect really completely forgets about any connection to the universal, to the whole, and to consciousness. And so the intellect brings us to focus more and more on less and less, which leads to unhappiness, which leads to conflict, because people then grab onto their small piece of the whole, protect it, defend it, and that leads to conflict. So what is it that mediators then do is to help the parties refocus on the whole, refocus on the fact that there is, in fact, a whole and a universal, help the parties to actually see that there's not just those pieces, but also the whole. And then how their pieces fit into that whole, what bridges there are between the pieces, but also what their connections are, both within the whole and within the pieces. And that really brings parties back to happiness, to openness, to willingness, and that it really can form the resolution to the conflict. So I was very happy hearing that, felt like it really made a difference to me, that what I was doing was so much a part of bringing consciousness back into conflict. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Zena. That was wonderful. And I love how you connected mediation to Pragya Parad and people identifying with just one small piece of their consciousness, and how that leads to conflict, and how identification with the wholeness really leads to a greater understanding and opens the door for solutions to come in. That was wonderful. Thank you. So now Ellen X. Jones is going to join the conversation. Ellen is a lawyer and mediator. She is also an adjudicator with the Iowa Department of Inspections and Appeals. Ellen was a professor and senior administrator at Maharishi University of Management for many years, where she taught law and government courses and served as a member of the university's executive council, chief lien officer, institutional advancement officer, and dean of student life, among other positions. She also served as a member and chair of the board of directors at the Maharishi School. Ellen learned Transcendental Meditation while a first-year law student at the University of Pennsylvania in 1970. She became a TM teacher in 1972. She has served as associate counsel to 2 committees of the U.S. Senate, as an assistant attorney general of Texas, and as legal counsel to various nonprofit organizations, as well as private clients. Ellen has been active in many civic organizations and served as co-chair of the Fairfield Strategic Planning Commission and member of the Fairfield City Council. Ellen lives in Fairfield, Iowa with her husband, Chris. They have 2 grown sons and an adorable grandbaby. Their older son, Jeremy, is a graduate of MIU's BA and MBA programs and is now a leadership consultant and coach for startups based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Benjamin received his degrees from Washington University in St. Louis and Stanford University, and now works as an environmental reporter for Vox Media based in Brooklyn, New York. So welcome, Ellen, and I will let you dialogue now with Zena.
You're muted.
Ellen, I think you're muted.
How many times do we forget to mute? Thank you very much for the introduction, and sorry about that muting. I enjoyed the presentation that Zena just made, and agree that the connection to the mistake of the intellect is very valuable, a very valuable understanding for a mediator, because during mediation, I find that, we start with the positions of the parties, but then we're looking for the interests behind those positions, and we go deeper and deeper and deeper until we find that underlying field where resolution can be found. And I like to call that transcendental mediation, as opposed to transcendental meditation. So some questions I have for you, Zena, that I think that I've encountered in my practice of mediation over the years have to do with some of the challenges that we face as mediators. For example, and I would like to ask you if you have encountered these challenges and how you have handled them. And especially with remote mediation, which is now a possibility people may not be aware of, some of these challenges are exacerbated to some extent. So if you have a mediation where you have one party, and this goes for in-person or remote mediation, where one party is more reluctant than the other, and but reluctantly agrees to mediation, but wants to limit the amount of time they're committing to, because that means expense as well, but also time. And you want to see a resolution because you support the whole concept, yet you're not sure the time allotted will be sufficient. And maybe you say yes, and then the time is not sufficient. Any experience with that?
Oh, lots. Yes.
Okay.
I think that it's often true that one party is more interested in mediation. And I think the other question in my mind, I don't know whether you always have this question in your mind when that happens as well, is that other party not as interested in resolution as well?
Correct.
And yeah, and so part of I love that transcendental mediation. Part of the transcendental mediation aspect of it, to me, is that the parties are totally free to not want to reach a resolution.
Right.
That is absolutely their right. And I don't know if you do this, but I regularly do individual meetings with parties before the mediation. And that allows me to really get a sense of where are they coming from? What is it they're thinking? What is their goal? What is it that they want? And I try to elicit from the parties what is their goal in coming to mediation before they ever step in. And if one person says, I don't think there's going to be a resolution, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, then my question is, how can we make this as efficient as possible? What process do you think will allow that to happen? Where do you want me to start? So I draw that person into helping me create the process that will allow them to reach their goal, which then more often than not gets them more committed to the process than they were.
Very good.
And then if it doesn't work, I really try to be totally transcendental about it in terms of, hey, this is their process. They have to decide how much they want to put into it. I don't, can you carry off that feeling of, hey, this isn't mine?
That's a challenge sometimes. If you're committed to
Yes.
harmony and, if it's people you
Yep.
may know, but be, neutral in resolving situations, you do have an interest, or maybe a bias, we could call it, in getting the thing resolved. But I think that could
Yep.
undermine the ability to actually get it resolved and allow the parties to keep control of the situation.
So so do you mediate in the small town in Fairfield where you may know people?
Oh, yes, definitely
Ah,
so.
that's
So
much
it
harder,
adds
I
a
think.
different element, and it can be very
Yeah.
effective. I mean, just, so there's so much good that can come. That also brings up a question I have for you, and that, in this case, there was a third party, an extra person on one side who had a different orientation and a certain amount of influence. And I've had other situations where there might be multiple people on one side, with one person with outsized influence who was, guiding everybody else who really maybe wasn't as familiar with the process or the issues or whatever. And sometimes could be bordering on bullying. How do you deal with that, or have you not had that situation? Well, you've dealt with union and management. I'm sure you've had that situation.
Yeah, I was going to say that's in terms of bullying the other people on their side. Is that what you're
Sort of,
referring
maybe
to?
bullying is a little bit strong, but having outsized and the next day, no, we don't want to do this.
Oh, I know that is so disappointing
Yes.
when that happens. And, I think part of it is we're fighting ourselves in those situations because, power is what power is. I remember it when I first was involved in labor negotiations. Somebody said, the lion's share goes to the lion. I thought, oh yeah, that's really true. And yet we may be internally fighting for the underdog, or we may be thinking, these people need to get a spine. They need to be fighting with this person who has the outside influence. But that's all us. And so, I find I'm having those conversations with myself in terms of this situation is what this situation is. These people I've been dealing with for however long. They need to be resolved either to live with it or to fight it. But I can't, the chances of my changing it during this mediation are slim to
It's not
none.
going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
That-
And
that's-
I think where I get caught up is when a lawyer does that because the party has hired that lawyer. They should be working for the party and
Right.
not undermining them.
Right.
And particularly when it's a small business or a divorce where the parties aren't particularly sophisticated and they think that they can come to a resolution and the lawyer doesn't want them to. And I'm sitting in a caucus with the lawyer saying that don't do that. You can't, I'm not going to allow you to do that. That just brings sort of everything for me up. And of course, one of the rules.
I'm sorry, do you actually have a conversation with a lawyer who's being too directive, or you just let it be what it is?
Well, I think that's really the internal fight is,
That's
should
what I
I
thought.
get into an argument
Yeah.
with this lawyer or not? And I do sometimes. It almost never turns out well. And then I don't feel good. And then I don't sometimes, and then I don't feel good. And once I had a client call me up after the mediation and say, I don't want to follow what my lawyer says. What should I do? Well, boy, does that put a mediator in a really, really bad position. And so, what I said is, you should always get a second opinion.
Good.
It's sort of the most I could do
Right.
instead of saying what I wanted to, which is, this guy works for you. You don't work for him.
That's right. Well, this brings up another question I think people might be interested in. That is, mediation. Obviously, we're mediators and we are passionate about the process and have seen the tremendous benefits it can bring to the parties, and not just a resolution, but an ongoing relationship and all that sort of thing.
Yes.
How do you, or to what extent and how do you encourage people in general and lawyers to buy into mediation?
So I start with I mentioned I have separate interviews for the parties. And but I also do that with the lawyers. So I'll start with a conference call with the attorneys, and then I'll have separate calls with the attorneys, and then separate appointments with the parties. And in the conference call with the attorneys, I start by team building. Just how are we going to help these parties settle? What is it that we need to do? Do you need to be doing the talking? Do they need to be doing the talking? What do you think the seating arrangement ought to be? Is a joint session going to work, or are we going to have to do? So it's just starting from, let's all work together to plan this out. And then I have a separate call with the attorneys so they can tell me all their doubts and fears and what their client is going through and the good or bad relationship they have with their clients. And then with the parties.
And then with the parties, and then just to extend this, and I think we want to leave some time for Vicki to dialogue with you as well. How about for people who may not be as aware of mediation? In other words, we have people on this webinar who are going into business. They may be new to mediation. They may have a little understanding how the process works, but when push comes to shove and they're in a dispute or someone else is in a dispute, how does one attract them to the process of mediation?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think, boy, that is such a huge question. And I think it often does start with the general counsel's office, which can be very helpful in guiding people either to litigate or to settle. But I find that within departments in companies, I'm brought in to help with small disputes.
Right.
And so then they may bring me in for larger disputes or think about that process for larger disputes as well. So I'm I don't know if you would agree, I'm of the opinion, wherever they want me to start, I'll start.
Right. And if it's just two friends in a department who are having a battle over a love interest, I've had that kind of thing, lifelong friend.
Yeah.
And they asked me to mediate, and you don't need lawyers, just so people are very clear. Lawyers do not have to be part of the process. And they were able to hear each other as you were describing some of the purposes and understand each other better and restore some of the friendship, at least as a start for
And business partnerships. Oh my, those are the people who used to really work well together and adore each other, and then all of a sudden there's a conflict.
Exactly. Well, the same for dissolution of marriage situations. So
yes,
there's many potentials for mediation. I tried it with my kids when they were little, and it was very effective process because they got so tired of the introduction that they ran off laughing, and they were playing together.
Kids do laugh at it.
Many uses.
Ellen, thank you so much for joining us today and dialoguing with Zena. I think you coined a new phrase today, transcendental mediation. I think we're going to use that one in the future. And I feel it's very connected to what Zena was speaking about really maintaining a true, deep sense of neutrality. And I would suspect that is an evolution that happens over time as a mediator, is how to really get to a space of neutrality. And I can only imagine that practicing transcendental meditation expands that ability over time.
May I just say one other thing on that point? When I was taking the mediation training with a fabulous lawyer and trainer, Vicky's taken it with him also, Dick Calkins, he was dean of trade school. And after the whole week, he said, I would like to introduce your students at MIU, it was MUM then, to mediation and the mediation tournament, because the way you're peacemakers, and your demeanor is such that it's given to mediation, which doesn't mean we have our challenges, but it was a great thing. And he came down, and that was the beginning of the whole mediation tournament here. So Vicki can say more about that.
That's beautiful. So now we have our own lovely Vicki Alexander Harriet. Vicki is an attorney and mediator who graduated with a BA from Wesley College, a BA in psychology from Wesley College. After graduation, she became a teacher of transcendental meditation. After receiving a JD from Boston University of Law and an LLM in taxation from New York University School of Law, she worked as a tax associate in a large Boston firm. Vicki retired from the full-time practice of law in 1983 to found with her husband, Charles Skip Alexander, the Institute for Research on Consciousness and Human Development. The Institute studied the effects of the practice of transcendental meditation on a variety of populations, including a project with institutionalized elderly and groundbreaking research in Israel on the effects of the collective practice of the Advanced TM and TM City program on the society as a whole. The research found a strong correlation between the size of the meditating group and indicators of positive and negative trends in society, such as car accidents, fires, crime, and the stock exchange. Most notably, when the group size exceeded the square root of 1% of Israel's population, there was a marked reduction in war deaths and war intensity in the conflict in Lebanon, in which Israel was embroiled at that time. After completing this research, they were invited to join the faculty at Maharishi International University, where she has taught a wide variety of courses, including business law, taxation, human resource management, mediation and negotiation, communication skills, cross-cultural communication, ideal relationships, difficult conversations, and environmental law. She also has a career in university administration. She served as the Associate Dean of Faculty, Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, Chairperson of the Student Affairs Council. She was Chair of the Department of Management for 17 years. She is currently Dean of Faculty, Co-Director of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion, and Co-Director of the Masters in Leadership and Workplace Conflict Resolution. She is also the coach of the MIU mediation team and serves on the Board of Directors of the International Academy of Dispute Resolution, the Fairfield Arts and Convention Center, the Institute for Biointegrity, and the International Foundation for Consciousness-Based Education. So again, so many credentials here this morning between the three of you. Vicki, I'll let you start your conversation with Zena.
Well, I'm just thrilled that we've had the opportunity to bring Zena to MIU again as a speaker this time, and I had her also speak at our international tournament this fall for INADR. So I'm really glad that we've had this opportunity to connect, and it's wonderful to share.
And Vicki, you're the one who connected me with the tournament and
Yes.
INADR. I hadn't ever heard of it until I read about it in one of the MIU newsletters. And so then I tracked you down and then I got involved.
In fact, I wanted to ask you a little bit about, you spoke at one of the INADR congresses at Drake about elder law. And that's not something that I've really talked a lot about with the students, but it is something that we're all going to be probably dealing with at some point in our lives. And so I thought it might be an interesting thing to talk about, because in elder law and dealing with mediations in that context, you've got a lot of different stakeholders. And it's not the traditional kind of conflict that we've been talking about, where you've got, a dissolving business, maybe a dissolving marriage. You've got an ongoing family relationship, and how do, maybe tell us a little bit about the stakeholders involved in this kind of mediation.
Although I will say that a lot of mediations in business are ongoing relationships. So
that's right. Yes, it's not always
yeah. And even in divorce, there are ongoing relationships. So all of that. But I think your point is really well taken, because with elder mediation, you've got a family that's trying to, in some way, take care of an elder, either financially or physically. And there are a lot of conflicts that come up. And one of the things that frightened me when I first started doing it is in divorce mediation, people have been fighting for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. In elder mediations, people have been fighting each other for 50, 60, 70 years, and now have to take care of their elderly parent. And some of those conflicts really run deep. They're traumas often that people are dealing with. And yet they need to come together in the care of this elder. Often there is someone who is living with the elder and everyone else is suspicious of them, or caring for the elder and everyone is thinking they're not doing a great job. And then the person who's giving the care is thinking nobody's helping me. I mean, there are just all of these things that are going on all at once. And how do you deal with all of those things all at once? And the first time I ever did one of them, and I heard one 50-ish gentleman say to another 50-ish gentleman, "Mom always did like you best." It's like, okay, now where do we go with this? I mean, it's just, there's just so much going on. It's a circus. truly a circus. And even more important for them to think about the whole
Yes.
as
Yeah.
instead of the pieces. Yeah.
And you probably also get in-laws because the siblings often, I mean, I know in my particular family case, the students know because I've talked about it, my sister-in-law is, you know, an amazing caretaker of my mother. And
Yes.
we're
Yeah.
fortunate we're all on the same page and supporting each other. But I can
Yeah.
imagine if that wasn't the case, you know, that you could find that the siblings may be together with you in the mediation at the mediation table, and their spouses may be coming
Well,
in
that's
from
it.
the
It's a huge issue. Do the spouses come in or not? And
yes.
one case that I did where, just like in your family, it was the daughter-in-law that was really caring for the mom. And there were 6 siblings. This was the wife of the youngest. And all of the other 5 siblings hated her. And so they announced to me that if she came into the mediation, they would leave. Well, she was the only one that had any information about the mom. It's like the rest of them were all guessing. She was the one who was there, who had the care, who had seen the medical records, all of that. So I said to them, if she's not here, how are you going to get that information? And they said, that's your problem.
Oh my gosh.
Like,
How did that go?
oh,
Did you get
not
her?
well. So no, I didn't. So, but what I did was put her in another room. She gave me the information. I came back in, gave the
So
information to the other siblings
yeah, like caucus with her in one room and everybody
and
else.
everybody else in the other. And the spouses of the others were kind of milling around in the waiting room. They all wanted to come in too. It was like, yeah, it was a zoo.
Yeah. Do you find though that it's a successful way to help people deal with these kinds of issues with parents?
It often is, and it often can be. It does take a lot more planning and separate interviewing. I interview every one of the siblings ahead of time and the elder, and sometimes their spouses as well. So that takes a lot of time. But if you don't do it, then you don't really get a sense of what is, because if they just all descend on the room, it's like you
Yeah.
have no idea what's going on. The lawyers can be extremely helpful in those cases. And so bringing the lawyers in, there's sometimes a guardian ad litem, there's maybe an attorney for the elder. The elder may or may not be able to truly participate, you know, if they have physical problems or dementia. So there's just so much going on in there. One of the techniques that I found that's really helpful is to have a talking piece.
Mm.
And so whoever has the talking piece can talk and nobody else can. And the families love that. It's the first time that they've been orderly around each other. And so I do find that after a while, they may just start conversing. But if they get into a fight again, somebody will say, where's that talking piece? We need to use that again.
That's a
And
great.
it is. It's really, really helpful. Yeah. And
That's
I've even used that remotely.
That's
Yeah.
so great, Zena. It brings to me that we used to do that in my family with our kids. We would have a talking piece and pass it around the table, and each child would have a chance to speak, and everyone else would just listen while they had the talking piece. So that's wonderful. I'm glad you're using that. So we're going to open the floor up to questions now. So if you have a question for Zena, she would love to answer it for you. Go ahead and type your questions into the chat. As the questions are coming in, Zena, I have one for you. We have a class called Difficult People, Difficult Conversations here at MIU. And when we spoke on the phone to prepare for this conversation today, you had some really interesting insights on how you counsel managers who have difficult people in the workplace, because you don't just do exclusively mediation, you also do workplace conflict resolution. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Boy, now I don't remember what it was I said. What was it that you thought was so helpful?
Well, what I thought was helpful was that you really counseled managers who have difficult personalities in the workplace, that they have to closely monitor that person and give them very strict boundaries and guidelines.
Yeah, and so a lot of times there is a real behavioral disordered person in the workplace, and those are really, really difficult situations. Um, Managers really don't want to have to spend that amount of time monitoring somebody, staying on their case, writing them up, doing all of the necessary things. And I can understand that. It takes just enormous amounts of time to do it, but it's the only way that works, unfortunately. And so, yeah, I am in the position of saying to somebody, yeah, it's really horrible and you have to do it. And getting some counsel in terms of what are the boundaries that you're going to be putting on that person. And when they violate a boundary, even if it's small, with someone like that, you got to be right on it. You can't wait for it to get bigger or it gets completely out of bounds. One of my colleagues counseled me that if you walk into a workplace and you find that people have all taken sides, and that it's like there are two factions within that department or within that workplace, there's almost always a behavior disordered person in the middle of it somewhere. And that you need to find who that person is and begin to work with them to make changes, or people are not going to be able to get together because that person has defined themselves as victim. Then they have the people who are helping them, and there are people that they have offended who are now trying either to get rid of them or are against them, and the whole workplace is now in a battle. So yeah, it's huge, absolutely huge.
Fascinating. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So we have a question in from Darcy Wright, and she'd like to know what you feel the connection is between leadership and conflict resolution.
Wow. I mean, that leadership is conflict resolution, I think. I'd be also interested in what other people think, but one of the things that we all think of when we go into a profession is that what we're going to be doing is practicing that profession. And the truth of the matter is that we're going to be dealing with people and dealing with people's conflicts. And every once in a while, we get to practice our profession. So if we're in finance and we're a manager, we're dealing with people mostly. And then every once in a while, we're dealing with finance. If we're in law and we're working in a law firm, most of the time, what we're dealing with is not just the people in the law firm, but our clients and conflict resolution. So it's just a central part of what we do as leaders and anyone in any profession or in any leadership position. So I think we have always thought of conflict as aberrant. And I think we need to start thinking of conflict as the human condition. And what is our approach to that part of the human condition?
It's a really beautiful insight. I have a friend whose mother always says, you can have the best laid plans and then the people show up.
Yes.
Exactly what you were just saying.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we have another question from Maximilian Ostheimer, and he wants to know, when you look back on your path, what was most important to you to become an effective mediator?
Wow. Well, obviously TM is huge in my ability to do anything, and including mediation. But a lot of what you become capable of doing through TM, which is having patience. I was never a patient person, ever. And both TM and mediation have really taught me a level of patience that I just didn't know that I had. Also, curiosity and compassion for really trying to understand what is it that's going on with this person? Why are they acting in a particular way? What are their fears? And compassion for people who are in the middle of conflict and who are really afraid of what's going to happen to them. Most people in conflict are acting out their fears. And so for us to be able to really connect with them around what are they worrying about, what are they concerned about, and have compassion and empathy for them really makes a difference. When I was doing labor negotiations, I was always thinking in terms of structure and institutions and systems. And I think what mediation has done for me is to really get down to looking at the people in the midst of all of it. And when I went back into labor negotiations, what I realized was how much better I was at it for having that real vision of the person in the middle of it, the people in the middle of it, and that level of curiosity and compassion, and not just looking at the structure of the institution and the system that they were part of.
Oh, it's beautiful, Zena. I have one more question for you. When we spoke on the phone, you also mentioned that one thing you have noticed is that when people have a conflict or an issue in the workplace, they also generally tend to have that same issue in other areas of their life, in their marital relationships, in their relationships with their children or their friends. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, that actually I think is really helpful for people who are going into business, is to understand that people play out all of the issues in their life in the workplace as well as at home. And I think I mentioned to you that one of the places that it really came home to me was I was mediating a dispute between some partners in a law firm. And as I was talking to one of the partners separately, after I had talked with them together and we were trying to work things out, this particular partner said that they had been treated very badly by this one other particular partner, and then said that he also treated his wife that way.
Mhm.
And that she was very upset that he felt that he could act that way in the workplace. She didn't like it at home, but that was not her area to worry about. She didn't want that kind of behavior in the workplace. And I thought, wow, that's so interesting that he would be acting in the same way. Because I mean, my illusions are that people go to work and they become adults. That was an illusion. But the fact that we are playing out all of the same issues in our lives, that we pick not only marital partners, but bosses and coworkers to play out the very same issues from our childhoods, and that we need to work out. That it's all the same, and it's all there. So what meaning does that have for a mediator? I think in the end, just a real understanding that people are people, and that we have to understand that there's not, as much as we might say we want a workplace standard of conduct and we want ethics in a particular way, that people are people and they're going to be playing out their own issues wherever they are.
That is absolutely fascinating, Zena. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's a perfect place to end the discussion today. Thank you so much to Ellen, to Zena, to Vicki, for coming here today and for talking to us about mediation, but also for what you do. It's been an absolutely fantastic dialogue. And I think we've seen that mediation allows people to speak, to be seen, to be heard. As a good mediator powerfully holds space without judgment. And it's truly a tool for empowerment, where the parties involved are invited to find solutions for themselves. It offers a peaceful roadmap through conflict. The powerful silence within all of us is a place of non-judgment and non-duality. From this deep well of silence, all solutions are possible. We have the power to find solutions where there once only seemed to be conflict. Mediation opens the door to elevate individuals from conflict-based consciousness to a solution-based orientation. So Zena, Ellen, and Vicki, I thank you for what you do. You are making the world a calmer, clearer, more enlightened place, one mediation at a time. And thank you to everyone who joined from the College of Business today and from MIU. Your commitment to your own consciousness and your own evolution and your commitment to the sustainability of the way we live our lives is not only an inspiration, but offers a great source of hope for the future. So thank you for joining us today on this discussion on mediation.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. This has been really wonderful. A great dialogue, a great chance to connect with everybody. And thank you, Jenny, for doing such a great job hosting us and guiding us through the process.
Thank you. Well, have a wonderful day, everyone.